You work 5 days a week including weekends, right? The tavern manager, seemingly 35, the same age as me, confirmed. I responded with a yes, forcing a smile. I work as a full-time line operator in a food factory of a chain supermarket. Our job is to prepare the meals and lunch boxes that would be sold in the stores. My shift is from 7 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon. Since we operate in shifts, there is no overtime. That means I am relatively free in the evenings. That's why I decided to get a part-time job. I chose a tavern in the downtown area not too far from my one-bedroom apartment. Although I was a bit old for a part-time job, I easily passed the interview and got hired. The work hours here were from 6 in the evening until 11 at night. Both my day job and evening job gave me 2 days off a week. So, at least 3 days a week, I worked from 7 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon at my main job, and then 2 hours later, from 6 in the evening till 11 at night at the tavern. Considering the travel time and other factors, I probably got around 4 hours of sleep. Order up for the Alfredo pasta. In the factory's employee cafeteria, Catherine, who was in charge of cooking and serving, called out. This cafeteria was operated by a specialized contractor, so everyone working there was from that company. Other than Catherine, all the female staff were older women. Because of that, Catherine stood out. She was always cheerful and spread her kindness to the employees who came to eat. Many young male employees secretly admired her. The person she called for the Alfredo pasta was me. I went to the counter with my ticket. "You really like that Alfredo pasta, don't you?" Catherine, wearing her white headband, remarked. For an extra 50 cents, I could have had the crispy shrimp Alfredo pasta. Wonder if she thinks I'm being stingy. Feeling somewhat embarrassed, I simply nodded. She responded with a smile. "John, you look exhausted. You know, you've got bags under your eyes," said my junior colleague Peter, as I ate my pasta at the cafeteria table. At the food factory where I worked, side jobs were permitted, so I had told my co-workers about my part-time job at the tavern. "It's a floor job, so I'm on my feet all the time. It's pretty tough," I replied. It hadn't even been a month since I started the part-time job. "Don't push yourself too hard, okay? Take care of yourself," Peter advised as he finished his meal and stood up to leave. The reason I started the part-time job in the first place was to raise funds for renovating my aging family home back in Nebraska. My father passed away a long time ago. My mother lived in the family home with my sister and her family. She, now over 70, had begun to weaken, and last year she tripped over a step in the house and got injured. Thankfully, it wasn't too serious, but my sister suggested we should renovate the home to make it more accessible for our mother. My sister, who has 2 kids still in elementary school, is tight on funds. So, she asked if I could help financially. When you want to repay your parents, sometimes they are not around to receive it. Determined, I decided to work part-time at the tavern to raise funds for the home renovation. The factory's cafeteria was somewhat old-fashioned. You'd buy a meal ticket from a machine, pick up a tray, and line up. For set meals, there are pre-arranged side dishes that you grab for yourself before moving on. If there was a dish you didn't like, you could request a change, and they'd accommodate as best as they could. The same went for the amount of pasta or soup. It wasn't a massive workplace, so the cafeteria staff was familiar with most of us. The day I ordered set meal, I was lining up in the lane, picking up some side dishes onto my tray. As I was moving forward, I heard a man's voice from the front asking, "What happened to her?" Looking over, Catherine was being scolded by a man who seemed like the manager inside the kitchen. According to the older waitress I asked, Catherine had overslept and was late. "She's known to be late now and then," the waitress said with a wry smile. That weekend, I was off from the food factory job, and my part-time job at the tavern was only on Sunday. So, I went back to my family home on Saturday. I discussed house renovations with my sister, her husband, and a contractor. I checked the estimate provided by the contractor. I quickly did some mental math. I've got to keep up with the part-time job for another 6 months at least. I stayed overnight at my family home. I last visited at New Year. My mom seemed to have shrunk in size. For her, I thought, I'd work even harder at my job. The next day, Sunday, after coming back from my family home, I worked as usual at the tavern. On my way home that night, it was just before 11:30 p.m. I was walking through the busy streets where the tavern was. I passed by a small lounge, its sign familiar to me. Then I heard a bubbly "see you next time, we'll be waiting." Without thinking, I looked in that direction. A few hostesses from the lounge were outside, seeing off some drunk customers. Among them, I recognized a face. It was Catherine, always cheerful and bright, serving us at the company cafeteria. Her hair, hidden under a hairnet at the cafeteria, was now slightly dyed brown and had soft curls. I stood there, watching Catherine on the street. As she was about to go back into the lounge, she casually looked back. Our eyes met. Come Monday, I ordered Alfredo pasta as usual at the company cafeteria. Order for Alfredo pasta. It was Catherine. I went to collect it. For some reason, both of us felt awkward. I looked into the bowl of pasta. There was an unexpected pieces of chicken in my pasta. I glanced at Catherine as if asking about it. I added it as a bonus, she whispered, continuing. About last night, please keep it a secret that I worked there. I chuckled, thinking she bribed me with pieces of chicken. Well, it's fine. To begin with, I never thought of telling anyone about seeing her there the previous night. Everyone has their reasons. Just like I started the tavern job to help with home renovations, Catherine must have had her reasons too. Just, whatever it was, I was a tad curious. Then, a few days later, welcome. Having gotten used to my job at the tavern, I'd greet customers as they walked in without even thinking. It's like being one of Pavlov's dogs, salivating on cue. I looked at the customer, who just entered. There, Catherine was arm in arm with a middle-aged man. I was in shock and stared at her. She noticed me and froze. It was immediately clear that the man she was with was a customer from the club she worked at. That night, after coming back from my part-time job, I jumped into bed but couldn't sleep. Although I was physically tired, my mind was wide awake. That old guy, she's accompanying him. Catherine, all dolled up, looked stunning. The smug look on that sleazy old man's face irked me. Unable to fall asleep, I overslept the next morning and was late to work. My boss scolded me a lot. Having a side job is fine, but it shouldn't interfere with this job. All I could do was to apologize. At noon, as usual, I ordered Alfredo pasta in the company cafeteria. She was the one serving me. There was extra pieces of chicken in my bowl again, which I didn't order. I added it as a bonus. Are you sure you should have added it? Well, it's already in there. I feel bad, you always do this for me. We both whispered to each other. And I won't tell anyone, promise. It's not about that, you've been looking tired lately. I thought maybe you were working nights too. Someone in line behind me, waiting for their food, yelled, "Hurry up, can you meet up before your evening shift?" When I asked, she nodded in agreement. And that evening, a little after 5 p.m., Catherine and I met at a coffee shop near both our workplaces. Having two jobs is pretty tough, huh, don't you think? I just wanted to comfort her, but she looked at me intently. Then, she asked me why I was working nights at the tavern. I told her the honest truth, that I was trying to save up for home renovations. Oh, so you have a noble reason like that, she mused, taking a sip of her coffee. Then, she sighed. Why do you think I work as a hostess? She asked defiantly. I asked her why in return. I just want a more comfortable, luxurious life, and I need money for that. With a challenging look, she said, "Is that so wrong?" "Not at all, but isn't it risky if your main job finds out?" I asked her why she kept her hostess job a secret. "Yeah, my company doesn't look too kindly on it. The company that hired her to manage the cafeteria, like my food processing factory, for example, didn't like having employees associated with the nightlife business." That evening, after getting back from my part-time job at the tavern, I thought of her as I massaged my calf muscles from standing all day. If only we could live a bit more lavishly. She probably earns more now from working all day, but I wonder if she's truly living the life she wants. From then on, Catherine and I often met at the same coffee shop before our evening shifts. The lunch today was handled by someone else, so it was without chicken, right? You don't have to treat me. It makes it harder to ask. Saying this, I gave a slight nod. "John, you seem to have quite a few food preferences, don't you?" "Yeah, I get that a lot. What about you, Catherine?" When I asked her, she just shook her head. Around this time, she started calling me John, and I called her Catherine. She then asked me about other foods I dislike. After some thought, I replied, "Fatty bacon. Also, I do not like minced meat." "Really? It's so tasty though." A few days later, in the company cafeteria, I chose the set meal and lined up. That day's side dish was nachos with minced meat. As I always did, I was going to push aside the minced meat and eat just the nachos, when a hand from the opposite side placed a bowl on my tray. When I looked up, Catherine was there, whispering, "This is better for you, right?" I looked at the bowl on my tray. It was a generous serving of nachos without any minced meat. Of course, there are other servers, so I couldn't always get Catherine to serve me. However, when I was lucky enough to get her, she would add some kind of extra to my lunch. She had mentioned she was taking a few days off to go back home for her cousin's wedding, and after her return, we met at our usual coffee shop for the first time in a week. "You still look so worn out," she said, handing me a souvenir from her trip. "How was it? How's your family?" I asked, and she simply nodded to indicate that everything was the same. Then, out of the blue, she began. "When I was a child, a massive hurricane hit, and our house was blown away. The region where her family lived had suffered significant damage, and they were forced to evacuate for nearly a year. At the evacuation center, they only had rationed food, so they couldn't be picky. That's why she never became picky about food even now." I feel ashamed of myself hearing that. No, that wasn't my intention in sharing that. Living in temporary housing, and even after their home was rebuilt, her family lived frugally and scrimped and saved. That's why I wanted a more luxurious and graceful life. That's why I wanted money and worked as a hostess, she confessed. I just nodded in silence. Her cousin's wedding was a small, only within the family. But she kept talking about how beautiful and happy her cousin, dressed in a wedding gown, looked. "That's why I'm thinking of quitting the hostess job," she mentioned. "That sounds like a good idea. Just quit, right, Catherine?" I was insistent. Insistent that she quit being a hostess. "John, you ordered the pizza set A, right?" At the company cafeteria, Peter, sitting opposite me, looked at my plate with curiosity. "Doesn't it have more than mine? And doesn't it come with both potato and macaroni salad?" I tried to deflect with a cough, then turned to look at the serving line. The girl with the bandana was serving customers with an innocent expression. A few months later, after finishing my shift at the tavern, I started my walk home. That night was my last day at the tavern job. I had saved up enough for my family's home renovation and decided to quit the job. As I passed by the lounge where she used to work as a hostess, several hostesses came out to see off their customers. She was not among them. And then, As usual, I bought a meal ticket and entered the company cafeteria. Looking around inside, she wasn't there. She had disappeared from this cafeteria. She had transferred to another company cafeteria managed by the same operator. So, I no longer got any extra service from her. In this cafeteria. These days, I often reminisce about the time after her cousin's wedding when we met at the coffee shop after a week. After she said she wanted to quit her job as a hostess and I told her to just go ahead and quit, she later told me this. Seeing the happy face of her cousin, she began to wonder what truly made her happy. It wasn't the luxury of lounging around at home. It was thinking about what little extra treat she could give me in the company cafeteria while waiting for me to show up, wondering what would make me smile. And actually seeing my happy face. She said this, looking at me with intense affection. And yet, here I am, sitting at my own dining table like a kid kept after school, facing a dish of nachos with minced meat that I just can't stomach. I just can't handle it. I don't like the taste of it. Come on, eat up, she said, avoiding my gaze and looking away. I reached out and playfully tickled her collarbone. She brushed my hand away and looked back at me seriously. Listen, you need to start overcoming your dislikes, even if it's little by little. You have to eat everything and think about balanced nutrition. It's not just your body anymore. Giving in to Catherine's stern look, I dripped some chili sauce onto the nachos with minced meat. How did you like today's story? Your subscription and thumbs up are a huge motivation for us. We're looking forward to reading your comments. See you in the next video.